The house on Winthrop Lane. Bryson adjusted the rearview mirror, flashing a grin at Ian slumped in the back seat. Chris, ever the responsible older brother, kept both hands on the wheel as they cruised down the dimly lit suburban streets. Ethan, quiet as usual, sat shotgun, staring out the window as patches of streetlights slipped over the car like slow waves. It was Ian's idea. A girl he barely knew had invited him to a party, insisting it would be unforgettable. Ethan had raised an eyebrow at that. Most college parties were unforgettable for the wrong reasons. But Bryson had been quick to jump on board, desperate for anything more exciting than another weekend locked in his dorm room playing Call of Duty. As Chris turned onto Winthrop Lane, Ethan felt a knot of unease twist in his gut. The houses grew bigger here, older. Their grand facades and looming oak trees cast long, hungry shadows. And there, at the very end of the street, stood the house, an ancient Victorian, its white paint peeling, windows glaring out like blind eyes. "Holy crap," Bryson said, whistling. "This place is huge." Chris parked a few houses down, cutting the engine. They decided to pre-game with some beers from Bryson's backpack, laughing nervously under the weak glow of a street lamp. Ian barely spoke, furiously refreshing his phone. "She's not answering," he muttered. "Maybe she bailed," Ethan said, half hoping. "Nah, dude," Bryson said, cracking open a can. "We're already here. We're not turning around now." After a few drinks, they finally approached the house. Music floated out from the open door, but it was wrong. Not the heavy bass of trap or pop, but a strange low melody without words, like monks chanting in a ruined cathedral. Inside, the brightness was blinding. Every overhead light blazed, giving the place a sterile, unnatural glow. The guests milled around in formal clothes, men in tailored suits, women in evening gowns. The boys' jeans and hoodies made them look like kids who'd stumbled into a wedding reception. Ethan frowned. "This is weird. Maybe it's like a theme party," Bryson suggested weakly. Ian said nothing, eyes darting around, searching for the girl who had lured them here. They drifted through the house, snagging beers from a silver tray on a dining table piled high with untouched hors d'oeuvres. The music was louder inside, pulsing in their chests, a droning hum that seemed to vibrate the very walls. After a while, Chris grunted. "I'm gonna smoke." "Outside?" Ethan asked. "Yeah, back in the car." Chris shrugged. "Call me if it gets less lame." He vanished through the door, and for a few moments, Ethan felt a prickle of unease at losing their designated driver. Then 3 girls appeared. They were beautiful, almost unnervingly so, their smiles too wide, their eyes too bright. One held a bottle of tequila like an offering. "Entrance fee," she said, laughing. Her voice was musical but hollow, like a recording played slightly too slow. Never once to back down, the boys each took a swig. The liquor burned going down, but the buzz hit instantly, dulling Ethan's senses and making the room tilt slightly. They stuck with the girls, drinking and laughing. Bryson and Ian were quickly paired off, leaving Ethan with the third girl, Tina. She leaned close when she spoke, her perfume thick and sweet, almost cloying. It was then Ethan noticed it, a thin green line drawn across Tina's neck, like a child's careless stroke with a marker. It was so vivid it almost seemed to glow. "Weird makeup," he muttered to himself, shaking it off. But as the night dragged on, the house felt stranger. The walls seemed to close in, the corners darker despite the glaring lights. Guests brushed past him, their eyes lingering just a second too long, their smiles faltering into flat, blank stares. Bryson wandered off upstairs, hand in hand with his girl. Ian followed soon after, his companion giggling into his ear. Ethan stayed rooted to the spot, anxiety coiling tighter in his chest. He muttered something about needing the bathroom and slipped away. The hall was empty, doors lining it like dark mouths. He found a bathroom, but it was occupied. As he waited, a man emerged, tall, pale, wearing a white button-down and linen pants. He bumped into Ethan deliberately, standing too close. "Sorry," Ethan mumbled, stepping back. The man didn't move. He simply stared, his eyes flat and unblinking. Ethan noticed it then, the same green line on his neck. "Who invited you?" the man asked, voice low and rasping. "Callista," Ethan said without thinking. The man chuckled mirthlessly. "You see Callista here?" Ethan shook his head, heart thundering. The man smiled thinly, then disappeared into the crowd. Panic rising, Ethan rushed upstairs, desperate to find his friends. He pushed through the throngs of perfectly dressed guests, noticing now, with growing horror, that many bore the same green mark. He found Bryson first, standing at the top of the stairs, dazed and glassy-eyed. Ian wasn't far behind. "We need to leave," Ethan hissed. Bryson laughed. "You're just jealous." "Look at your neck," Ethan snapped. Bryson touched it absently. Ian did too, and there it was, faint but visible, thin red lines blooming where none had been before. "Probably just makeup," Ian said, but he sounded uncertain. A man brushed past them then, his green-marked neck bare and unmistakable. That was all Ethan needed. He grabbed Bryson by the arm and yanked him toward the stairs. Ian hesitated, torn before following. The guests watched them go, silent and still, their heads swiveling in eerie unison. They burst out the front door, sprinting down the steps and toward Chris's car. Chris, alarmed, started the engine the moment they piled in. "Go!" Ethan shouted. As they peeled away, Ethan looked back. Several guests had gathered on the porch, watching without moving. He thought he saw Tina among them, her smile sad and knowing. Their phones buzzed in unison. Messages from the girls. "Where are you? Come back. We're waiting." Ian stared at his screen, face pale. How did they know we left? No one answered. Bryson blocked the number. Ethan did the same. Ian hesitated, then followed. The drive home was silent, save for the hum of the tires against the pavement. Chris didn't ask questions. He just drove, faster than he should have. Later that night, Ethan sat on his bed, scrolling through the few photos he'd taken at the party. At first glance, they looked normal, but zooming in revealed something chilling. Faint, almost invisible lines crossing every guest's neck. Not just green or red. Some were blue, some yellow. All of them marked. And in the last photo, blurry and badly lit, Ethan saw himself reflected in a mirror. A thin, almost imperceptible green line stretched across his throat. He dropped the phone. 3 days later, Bryson stopped showing up to classes. His roommate said he just left one night. Ian was found unconscious in his dorm. A faint green line burned into his skin like a brand. Ethan packed his things and fled town. He never spoke of Winthrop Lane again. But sometimes, when he looked into a mirror under a harsh light, he swore he could still see it. That faint, whisper-thin green line, waiting for the right time to reawaken. The stolen backpack. Mark Halden never thought twice about where he left his things. It was the careless confidence of someone who had never truly been vulnerable before. Purdue University was massive, sprawling across blocks of the city like a kingdom built from glass and concrete. And Mark, a civil engineering graduate student, had started to think of it as his second home. That false sense of security shattered the afternoon he left his backpack unattended. It was late October, and the wind howled through the halls of the older campus buildings. Mark ducked into Marston Hall to escape the chill, cradling his laptop under one arm, coffee in the other. His midterm exam had ended earlier than expected, and he'd snagged a quiet spot in the corridor to finish some notes. When nature called, he figured he'd only be gone a minute. When he returned, his backpack was gone. No one had seen anything. No cameras, no witnesses. Just an empty bench where his things had been, and the distant sound of a closing door. Annoyance simmered inside him, but he brushed it off. Things could be replaced. Cards canceled. Keys reported missing. It was a hassle, but not a tragedy. At least that's what he thought. The first note appeared 3 days later. Mark had just pulled into the cracked driveway of his aging apartment building, a crumbling 3-story rectangle tucked into the worst part of town, when he spotted something wedged under his door. A scrap of paper. Scrawled in messy, almost childish handwriting were 3 words. "I see you." He stood there for a long moment, the cold biting his fingers. A joke? A prank? He glanced up and down the empty street, but saw only the skeletal trees rattling in the wind. Inside, he deadbolted the door and checked every room, heart thudding in his chest. The note had to be connected to the backpack. It was the only explanation that made any sense. But how? He'd already reported the stolen keys to his landlord. Mark made a mental note to follow up again tomorrow. The thought of someone having access to his apartment made him nauseous. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside sent his mind racing. He kept the deadbolt latched and even dragged a chair against the door, feeling slightly ridiculous, but unwilling to take chances. The second note came 2 days later. "I know what you did." Mark's hands trembled as he read it. The letter was slipped under his door again, as casual as junk mail. He hadn't done anything, unless grinding through classes and minding his own business counted as a crime. For the first time, Mark considered the possibility that this wasn't random, that whoever had taken his backpack had found something personal on his laptop, his schedule, his saved passwords, maybe even his address. The realization hit him like a bucket of ice water. He was being watched. He installed a deadbolt on his bedroom door the following day. He barely trusted the front door anymore. The landlord was predictably useless, brushing off his requests to change the locks with muttered excuses about budget constraints and scheduling issues. Mark started noticing other things too. His shoes were sometimes misplaced. His toothbrush felt damp when he hadn't used it. The overhead light in the kitchen swung gently, even when the windows were closed. He tried to rationalize it all. Stress, paranoia. But deep down, he knew better. The worst came one night as he was shutting the blinds. He caught it out of the corner of his eye, a quick, bright flash from the darkness across the street, like someone snapping a photo. He slammed the blinds closed, heart hammering in his chest. He didn't dare look again. Mark's world shrank. He skipped classes, too afraid to leave the apartment for long. His laptop's replacement sat unopened in its box. He barely slept, surviving on a diet of caffeine and anxiety. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday night. Mark returned from a desperate grocery run, no choice but to venture out, and immediately noticed something wrong. The door was ajar. He froze on the threshold, cold rain seeping into his sneakers. The chair he'd wedged against the door was toppled over inside. A single wet footprint stained the worn carpet. Mark inched forward, adrenaline roaring in his ears. His bedroom was a war zone. Dresser drawers yanked out, mattress flipped, his closet ransacked, clothes strewn like casualties. Pinned to his wall with a thumbtack was another note. "Found you?" Mark staggered back, bile rising in his throat. He slammed the door and bolted it again, heart pounding so hard he thought it might break his ribs. He called the police. They arrived within an hour, but predictably, they found nothing useful. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. "You should get new locks," one of the officers suggested, his tone disinterested. Mark wanted to scream. That night, Mark made a decision. If whoever it was knew his schedule, and they must, they'd expect him to leave for class the next morning. That would be their chance to come back, to do something worse. So he stayed, he hid. Mark crouched in the darkened corner of his bedroom, phone gripped tightly in one hand, a crowbar he'd found in the maintenance closet clutched in the other. Hours passed, his legs cramped, his back ached. At precisely 11:17 a.m., the doorknob turned. Slowly, deliberately. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He tightened his grip on the crowbar. The door creaked open, the chain lock catching, straining. Fingers slipped through the gap, long and pale. Mark didn't think. He lunged, swinging the crowbar with every ounce of terror he'd bottled up over the past week. A grunt, a sickening thud. The figure crumpled, half falling through the doorway. Mark stumbled back, heart hammering. It was a man, late 20s, maybe older, dressed in nondescript jeans and a hoodie. Blood pooled around his head where the crowbar had connected. The police came again. This time they had plenty to report. The man had no ID, no phone, no keys. He was a ghost, unknown to neighbors, unfamiliar to anyone nearby. His fingerprints weren't in any database. It was as if he'd never existed. Mark changed his locks the next day. He moved to a different part of town by the end of the month. Still, he never shook the feeling of being watched. Every time he spotted a figure lingering too long on the street corner, every time he caught a flash from the shadows, Mark remembered the feeling. The utter helplessness of knowing someone had taken everything, not just his backpack, but his sense of safety, his peace of mind. The scariest part wasn't the attack. It was the knowledge that someone had chosen him, and he would never know why. The hacked life. Madeline Reyes sat on the edge of her narrow bed, laptop balanced on her knees, fingers tapping in a flurry. Temple University loomed large in her life, classes, deadlines, papers. But tonight was a rare moment of triumph. Her group project, a semester-defining video presentation, was finished. She attached the file to her professor's email with a sigh of relief and hit send just before midnight. Outside, the city hummed and whispered. Her apartment sat on the second floor of an old brick building just a few blocks from campus. She could hear cars passing, muffled shouts, and somewhere a dog barking. It was background noise, harmless. She had no idea the worst night of her life was only hours away. Madeline had broken up with Ben 3 weeks prior. Their relationship, once sweet and full of possibility, had withered under the weight of arguments and hurt. She hadn't expected a clean break. Breakups were messy. But she also hadn't expected him to turn vindictive. At first, it was little things. She noticed new profiles trying to add her on social media. Strange messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Once, late at night, she swore she heard footsteps lingering outside her window. But she convinced herself it was the stress playing tricks on her. Ben had been kind, harmless, hadn't he? The next morning, Madeline dressed carefully for her class presentation. She was proud of the project and eager to show it off. Her group members waved at her as she entered the lecture hall, their faces bright with expectation. When the professor plugged in his laptop and opened the video, the room fell into an expectant hush. But it wasn't their project that appeared on the screen. Instead, a grainy, low-resolution video began to play. A figure wearing a white scream mask stared directly into the camera. Then the figure spoke, spewing a stream of vile, hateful, disgusting words. Not just about Madeline, but about their professor, the university, and even more shocking specific secrets only someone close to her would have known. Gasps filled the room. Someone laughed, high-pitched and uneasy. Madeline sat frozen, horror blossoming in her chest. The professor cut the video, his face pale. Eyes turned to Madeline, silent, accusing. She bolted from the room, tears streaming down her face. It took days to explain herself to the university, to prove that she had sent the correct project and that the video had been swapped, her email hacked sometime after the submission. IT services confirmed it. Her passwords had been too simple, reused across platforms. Ben swore he hadn't done it. He even cooperated with police. An investigation revealed that he had, however, posted her personal information on an online forum. Her address, her email, even hints about her passwords. "I didn't hack you," he said, voice trembling with indignation. "I was just angry. I didn't think anyone would actually do anything. But someone had." Madeline changed her passwords. She deleted old accounts. She blocked every unfamiliar number. She thought it would be enough. It wasn't. The messages began to flood in a week later. First on Snapchat, then Instagram, then on new numbers texting her directly. Pictures of her. Private pictures she had never intended for anyone else to see. Pictures from her phone, her cloud backups. Violated, exposed. She blocked the accounts. She cried. She raged. She called the police again. But without proof, there was little they could do. Digital ghosts could vanish with a click. Madeline stopped leaving her apartment unless absolutely necessary. She bought blackout curtains and installed extra locks. Still, she felt unsafe. Sometimes she would hear the faintest tapping at her window late at night. Sometimes she would see figures across the street, just standing, watching. Sometimes she would wake up with the unshakable feeling that someone had been inside while she slept. Weeks stretched into months. The random friend requests and messages continued, sporadic enough to make her question whether it was over, frequent enough to keep her fear alive. A single new snap message appeared one night as she sat at her kitchen table, homework forgotten. "You can't hide forever." She didn't open it. She deleted the app. But deleting the app didn't erase the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone had her life in their hands. Someone who had once glimpsed her through the cracks Ben had left open and decided they wanted to see more. Madeline moved out at the end of the semester. She left Temple. She changed her number. She changed her name on social media. But she still checks over her shoulder. She still jumps at shadows. She still sees flashes of white in the corner of her vision sometimes. A mask, a figure, a memory she cannot scrub away. Her new apartment is small but secure. She's more careful now. Stronger in some ways. But she knows some things never really end. Some monsters don't need to be near you to haunt you. And some doors once opened can never be closed again.